Hey guys, welcome to the latest video for my Christian faith class. Please feel free to post your comments or suggestions below. In this video, we will explore the Catholic Reformation. Hold on, because we're going fast, because it's Friday afternoon. I want to get home early. So pause the video, stop it, go back, rerun it if you need to, but we're getting started now. The first question is, what do we call the Catholic Reformation? That may sound simple, but it's really not. According to your textbook, it describes the Catholic Reformation with two terms. First is the Catholic Counter-Reformation. This aspect of the Catholic Reformation focuses on the Catholic response to the Protestants. It involves developing works that counter the Reformation claims and present the Catholic view. It also involves destroying some of the works written by Protestants. The next aspect is simply called the Catholic Reformation. It involves those aspects in which the Catholic Church is reforming itself. The climactic event is the Council of Trent. We'll talk about that in a moment. Do the Catholics respond to the Protestant Reformation? The answer is yes and no. What we must realize is that the world is bigger than simply Germany, Switzerland, and England. Catholics at this time are exploring the whole world, not just Europe. Not only is the church bigger than Europe, but the Reformation actually begins in the church prior to Martin Luther. Remember this guy? Erasmus? He was translating the Bible from the Greek, and he was also writing works to transform the church by critiquing it and offering solutions. There's also Spain. I know that's in Europe, but it's an area that we haven't really focused on so far. Cardinal Jimenez is in Spain, creating the Complutensian polyglot. Not only is that hard to say, it's pretty hard to spell as well, but it's a Bible with parallel columns, with Greek on one side, with the Latin on the other. In the city of Alcala, there's a great university being founded, and its role is primarily to train priests, to train them in Catholic doctrine, but also to train them to respond to the Protestant Reformation. Throughout Spain, the Index and the Inquisition are used to reform the church there. There's another response as well. There are numerous orders that are created during this time to combat the Reformation and to cleanse the church. There's the Oratory of Divine Love, the Theatines, Congregation of the Mission, Ursulines. We've got one of those schools in New Orleans. Society of Jesus. We've got a Jesuit school in New Orleans too. There were also the older religious orders such as the Capuchins or the Carmelites that were involved in the Reformation as well. Now let's move on to the Council of Trent. You'll notice that it had 3 sessions and lasted from 1545 to 1563. There was a lot of drama in between those years. If you'd like to learn more about this, maybe you need to take my Reformation class. I think I'm going to offer that in the fall, so look forward to that. It's a great course. Alright, so the first session deals with doctrinal definitions. Guess what kind of doctrinal definitions the Council addresses? The doctrines related to the Reformation. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. The second session continued with this doctrinal approach, but also dealt with practical matters about how to reform the church. The final session dealt mostly with disciplinary matters. What happens if a priest doesn't follow these new rules and regulations? What kind of disciplinary action should be taken? Let's first look at some of the doctrinal issues addressed by the Council of Trent. Remember how the Reformers focused on Scripture alone? Catholics had to address this. They addressed it by saying that Scripture is authoritative. However, Scripture is a product of church tradition. Therefore, tradition and Scripture should be viewed as equally important. They argued that Scripture is a product of tradition. Therefore, Scripture can't stand alone apart from the traditional interpretation of Scripture provided by the church. Next, we see original sin. There's no change there. Original sin taints us, and therefore we are born into sin and also share in Adam's guilt. Justification. Remember, reformers like Luther said justification by faith alone. But the Catholic tradition said that we are justified by our faith, and works are very important in that they work together with faith. So separating works from faith is impossible. Next, the sacraments. Transubstantiation is upheld, and the 7 sacraments are confirmed. Purgatory. Reformers deny purgatory. The Council of Trent said purgatory is a legitimate Catholic doctrine, therefore it must be maintained. Veneration of saints. Veneration of saints is also very important. Remember, reformers like Zwingli and Luther's friend Karlstadt held that we must avoid images because they can lead us to idolatry, and the veneration of saints is idolatry, according to these reformers. However, the Council of Trent upheld this practice in the Church. Now let's move on to the moral abuses dealt with at the Council of Trent. Now, to be honest, some of these cross the line between moral abuses and doctrinal abuses, and the lines get a little fuzzy, but let's not worry about that. The first is absenteeism. Believe it or not, there were some bishops who would be over a particular area, but they would live in Rome. So because they lived in Rome, the priests that were in their area sometimes got out of hand. You know, when the bishop's away, the priests are going to play. So this was a serious problem. Next is pluralism. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a cool picture, so you're just going to have to look at me while I talk about pluralism here. Pluralism was a problem in that in some areas the priest would take on the characteristics of those around them. So if an area was very Protestant, the priest would adapt and be very Protestant. Other areas, it depended on if there were Anabaptists in that area or Lutherans in that area. The priest would kind of try to adapt their theology to that area so they'd fit in. This becomes a real problem, though, however. You want priests who are sure of what Catholic doctrine is and follow it, so that Catholicism is the same throughout the land. Because, after all, the Council of Trent believes that Catholic doctrine is correct, so they want it to be consistent throughout the land. Sorry, I got nothing for this either. One of the interesting facts about Menno Simons, remember him, the Anabaptist, was that when he was a priest, he had heard that some were claiming that the Eucharist was merely symbolic and not literally the body and blood of Christ. He was curious about this, so he went to his mentor, another priest, and said, "What does Scripture say about the Eucharist?" His mentor replied, "I don't know. I've never read Scripture." So ignorance of Scripture, although not commonplace, did occur. And so the Council of Trent sought to remedy this by requiring priests to be educated. This ignorance of Scripture also led to some moral abuses as well, because some didn't know what Scripture said about marriage or concubinage or other moral issues. The council also addressed the issue of irresponsible ordination. As you remember our survey of the medieval period, sometimes even those outside the church would appoint bishops and priests. So irresponsible ordination had resulted in a corruption of the church. The Council of Trent combated this by making ordination much more difficult and also the process of ordination more rigorous. Finally, the Council of Trent also addressed the abuse of indulgences. We see here a woodcutting which was made by a Protestant, which shows the Pope, dressed as the Antichrist, selling indulgences. The Council of Trent cracked down on indulgences. It stated that all evil gain for the obtaining of them be abolished. This wraps up our investigation of the Catholic Reformation. Feel free to replay the video and to take notes as you go along. If you have any questions, stop in and see me.